immune thrombocytopenia. It is given in Nelson's chapter number 533, platelet and blood vessel disorders, on page number 3049. So let's start. The most common cause of acute onset thrombocytopenia, otherwise in a well child, is immune thrombocytopenia. Oh, sorry. Let's start again. The most common cause of acute onset thrombocytopenia in an otherwise well child is immune thrombocytopenia, also called as the immune or idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, that is ITP. What is the epidemiology? In a small number of children, estimated at 1 by 20,000, 1 to 4 weeks after exposure to a common viral infection, an antibody directed against the platelet surface develops with the resultant sudden onset thrombocytopenia. A recent history of the viral illness is described in 50 to 60% of the children with ITP. Okay, there will be a recent history of viral illness in 50 to 65% of the children with ITP. The peak age is 1 to 4 years of age, although the age ranges from early infancy to elderly. In childhood, males and females are equally affected. ITP seems to occur more often in the late winter and spring after the peak season of the viral respiratory illness. Approximately 5 to 10% of the ITP may reoccur more than 3 months after the initial disease resolution. Fine. So there will be a recurrence of 5 to 10% of ITP more than 3 months after the initial disease resolution. Okay. Now let's read the pathogenesis. The exact antigenic target for most such antibodies in most cases of the childhood acute ITP remains undetermined, although in the chronic ITP, many patients demonstrate antibodies against alpha-2, B, beta-3 and GP1B. Fine, there will be antibodies against these, this and this. After binding of the antibody to the platelet surface, circulating antibody-coated platelets are recognized by the Fc receptor on splenic macrophages, ingested and destroyed. What is happening is, there will be the circulating antibodies will be antibody-coated platelets are recognized by this Fc receptor, which is present in the spleen, splenic macrophages, and they are ingested and destroyed. The most common identifiable virus that have been described in association with the ITP is Epstein-Barr virus. Okay. Now let's move ahead. Let's try understanding this. I will read this. Okay. The scheme of megakaryocytopoiesis and the platelet production in the immune thrombocytopenia. Hematogenic stem cells are mobilized and megakaryocyte and erythroid progenitors accumulate with the MK committed progenitors, giving rise to mature MK under control of thrombopoietin, working with the chemokines, cytokines and growth factors, including the stem cell factor and interleukin 3, interleukin 6 and interleukin 11. Endoreplication results in the ploidy changes in the MKs and increased chromosome number up to 64, and mature MKs migrate to the endothelial cell barrier, delimiting the vascular sinus, and under the influence of the stromal derived factor 1 SDF1 give rise to the proplatelets that protrude into the circulation and produce large number of the platelets under the hemodynamic determinants. Therapeutically given, bromiplastim and L-Thrombopac enter the marrow and join with the TPO to stimulate the megakaryocytopoiesis and platelet production. This was tough to understand. Sorry, I couldn't. Let's move ahead. We saw the Epstein-Barr virus, so that was the most common cause, and HIV. And ITP is also noted as a rare occurrence after measles, mumps and rubella. Vaccination. Okay, so MMR vaccination can also cause ITP. Epstein-Barr virus related ITP is usually a short duration and follows the course of infectious mononucleosis. HIV associated ITP is usually chronic. In some patients, ITP appear to rise in children infected with the Helicobacter pylori or rarely after vaccines. The SARS-CoV-2 responsible for the COVID-19 infection has been associated with the development of ITP some of the vaccines for this virus. Clinical manifestation. The classical presentation of the ITP is previously healthy 1 to 4-year-old child who has a sudden onset generalized petechiae and purpura. Okay, so there is a 1 to 4-year-old child who has sudden onset generalized petechiae and purpura. The parents often state that the child was fine the previous day but is now covered with the bruises and purple dots. There may be bleeding from the gums and mucous membranes, particularly with the profound thrombocytopenia with platelet count less than 10 into 10 power 9 per liter. So what can be seen is child was fine before but now is covered with bruises and purple dots, and there may be bleeding even from the gums and mucous membrane. Fine, mainly if the platelet count is less than 10 into 10 power 9 per liter. There is a history of preceded viral infection 1 to 4 weeks before the onset of thrombocytopenia. Findings on the physical examination are typically normal other than the petechiae and purpura. Splenomegaly, lymphadenopathy, bone pain and pallor are rare. A simple classification system to characterize the severity of the bleeding in the ITP on the basis of the symptoms and the signs rather than the platelet count includes no symptoms, mild symptoms. This is what we are reading the classification. Okay, there can be no symptoms, mild symptoms, moderate symptoms and severe symptoms. Mild symptoms include bruising and petechiae and occasional minor epistaxis, very little interference with the daily living. Moderate symptoms are more severe skin and mucosal lesions, more troublesome epistaxis and menorrhagia. Severe symptoms include bleeding episodes, menorrhagia, epistaxis, melena, requiring transfusion or hospitalization. Symptoms interfering seriously with the quality of life. The presence of abnormal findings such as the hepatosplenomegaly, bone or joint pain, remarkable lymphadenopathy, other cytopenias or congenital anomalies suggest other diagnosis. There is leukemia, genetic syndromes. When the onset is insidious, especially in an adolescent, chronic ITP or the possibility of the systemic illness such as the Fine. So if there is hepatosplenomegaly or bone or joint pain or lymphadenopathy or other cytopenias, then we have to look for other diagnoses like leukemia or genetic syndromes. Fine. And when the onset is insidious, especially in an adolescent, chronic ITP or the possibility of the systemic illness such as this SLE is more likely. When the onset is insidious, that means platelet count has been decreased over a long period of time. Then we have to suspect any systemic illness like SLE is more likely. In addition, presentation at any atypical age should suggest an underlying disease. So what are the outcomes? Severe bleeding is rare in less than 3% of the cases. In one large international study, in 70 to 80% of the children who present with the acute ITP, spontaneous resolution occurs within 6 months. Therapy does not appear to affect the natural history of the illness. Fewer than 1% of the patient develop intracranial hemorrhage. Fine, but it is a very rare complication, but it can occur. Intracranial hemorrhage even can occur. Proponents of the interventional therapy argue that the objective of an early therapy is to raise the platelet count to more than 20 into 10 power 9 per liter and prevent the rare development of the intracranial hemorrhage. There is no evidence that the therapy prevents serious bleeding. Approximately 20% of the children who present with acute ITP go on to have a chronic ITP. The outcome progress may be related more to age. ITP in younger children is more likely to resolve, whereas development of the chronic ITP in adolescents approaches 50%. Fine, children can, in younger children, the ITP is more likely to resolve, while in adolescents, almost 50% can have chronic ITP. Let's move ahead on the laboratory findings. Severe thrombocytopenia, platelet count less than 20 into 10 power 9 per liter. This we should remember that severe thrombocytopenia is said when platelet counts are less than 20 into 10 power 9 per liter. Is common and the platelet size is normal or increased. Platelet size may be normal or increased. Reflective of the increased platelet turnover. In an acute ITP, the hemoglobin value, white blood cell and differential counts are usually normal, so all the other values are normal. Hemoglobin may be decreased in context of the profuse nosebleeds or menorrhagia, fine, because of bleeding. Hemoglobin might get decreased. Bone marrow examination, which is not routinely indicated in this disease, shows normal granulocytic and erythrocytic series with characteristically normal or increased numbers of the megakaryocytes. So on bone marrow examination, which is not indicated, may show what normal granulocytic, erythrocytic series with characteristically normal or increased megakaryocytes. We saw that, right? There may be characteristically normal or increased number of megakaryocytes because there will be increased production of platelets, and megakaryocytes are the precursors of platelets. Some of the megakaryocytes may appear to be immature and reflect increased platelet turnover. Indications for the bone marrow aspiration or biopsy include an abnormal WBC or WBC count or differential or unexplained anemia, as well as history and physical examination findings suggestive of bone marrow failure syndrome or malignancy. So in these cases only we have to do bone marrow aspiration or biopsy, that is if we are suspecting a bone marrow failure syndrome or malignancy. Other laboratory tests should be performed as indicated by the history and examination. HIV study should be done in at-risk population, especially sexually active teens. Platelet antibody testing is seldom used. Full and acute ITP. A direct antiglobulin test should be done if there is an unexplained anemia to rule out Evans syndrome. Fine. Evans syndrome is an autoimmune hemolytic anemia and thrombocytopenia. This also we should remember that Evans syndrome is an autoimmune hemolytic anemia and thrombocytopenia. So to rule out that, what we are supposed to do? A direct Coombs test. Fine. Evans syndrome may be idiopathic or an early sign of SLE, autoimmune lymphoproliferative syndrome or common variable immunodeficiency. Syndrome. An anti-nuclear antibody should be considered in adolescents, especially with features of SLE. Now coming to diagnosis and differential diagnosis. A well-appearing child with a moderate to severe thrombocytopenia and otherwise normal complete blood cell count. A normal exam findings has a limited differential diagnosis that includes exposure to medication, inducing drug-dependent antibodies and splenic sequestration because of the previously unappreciated portal hypertension, and very early aplastic process such as the Fanconi's anemia. Other than the congenital thrombocytopenia syndrome such as the thrombocytopenia absent radius, that is TAR syndrome, and MYH9 related thrombocytopenia, most marrow processes that interfere with the platelet production eventually cause abnormal synthesis of the RBCs. So what we read till now is the child will be appearing well, fine, and there can be moderate to severe thrombocytopenia but normal CPC, and differential diagnosis will be less if the other findings is normal, if the other findings in the CPC are normal. So these were the differential diagnoses that are exposure to any medication or splenic sequestration, and rarely there can be any early aplastic process such as the Fanconi's anemia. And other than that, there can be congenital thrombocytopenia syndromes like the TAR syndrome and the MYH9 related thrombocytopenia. TAR syndrome is thrombocytopenia absent radius. Most marrow process that interfere with the platelet production eventually cause abnormal synthesis of RBCs also. Right. So if there is any abnormality in the marrow which interferes with the platelet production, eventually will lead to what? Abnormal synthesis of RBCs and WBCs also, and therefore manifest diverse abnormalities on the CBCs. Disorders that cause increased platelet destruction on a non-immune basis are usually serious systemic illness and obvious clinical findings such as a hemolytic uremic syndrome and disseminated intramuscular coagulation, DIC. So what is given here is, if there is increased platelet destruction on a non-immune basis, they are usually indicate what? a serious systemic illness like HUS and DIC. Patients receiving a heparin may develop heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Right, we have read, no? Heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Isolated enlargement of the spleen suggests the potential for hypersplenism caused by the liver disease or the portal vein thrombosis. Autoimmune thrombocytopenia may be an initial manifestation of SLE or HIV infection, common variable immunodeficiency, and rarely lymphoma or autoimmune lymphoproliferative syndrome. So this is what we have read, that there may be autoimmune thrombocytopenia also, and maybe autoimmune thrombocytopenia may be the initial manifestation in diseases like HIV and SLE, fine, and rarely even in lymphoma or autoimmune lymphoproliferative syndrome. Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome must be considered in young males found to have thrombocytopenia with small platelets, fine. Usually what we saw was the platelet size were large, but in Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome, young males who have thrombocytopenia with small platelets, particularly if there is a history of eczema and recurrent infection, then we have to consider the diagnosis of Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome, fine. And Bernard-Soulier syndrome, on the other hand, involves macrothrombocytopenia, fine. Bernard-Soulier syndrome, what happens in Bernard-Soulier syndrome is macrothrombocytopenia. Gray platelet syndrome is usually associated with splenomegaly and pale colored platelets on the peripheral smear. Okay, gray platelet syndrome is something else, which is usually associated with what? Splenomegaly and pale colored platelets on the PS. Now coming to the treatment part. A number of treatment options exist, but there are no current high quality data showing the treatment affects either the short or the long term clinical outcome of the ITP in children. Okay, so many patients with new onset ITP have mild symptoms, with findings limited to petechiae and purpura on the skin despite severe thrombocytopenia. Compared with the untreated controls, treatment appears to be capable of inducing a more rapid rise in the platelet count to presume a safe level of more than 20 into 10^9 per liter. Although no data indicate that the early therapy prevents the intracranial hemorrhage. So anti-platelet antibodies bind to the transfused platelets as well as they do to the autologous platelets. So if we even transfuse platelets, the antibodies will bind to their platelets also. Thus platelet transfusion in ITP is usually contraindicated unless life-threatening bleeding is present. Okay. Management guidelines. Fine. So this was an important part. Okay, we should remember that antibodies that were binding to the person's autologous platelets will bind to the transfused platelets also. So platelet transfusion is not indicated unless there is a life-threatening bleeding present. Management guidelines for the ITP in children and adults reinforce existing emphasis on the prioritizing watchful waiting for spontaneous resolution or outpatient therapy in uncommon cases for which the treatment is needed. So we are just supposed to wait and monitor the patient. Initial approach to the management of the pediatric ITP include the following. So now what we are supposed to do is no therapy other than education and counseling of the family and patients with minimal, mild and moderate symptoms as defined earlier. This approach emphasizes the usually benign nature of the ITP and avoids the therapeutic roller coaster that ensues once interventional therapies begin. Okay, so we have to just wait because ITP has a benign nature. It will resolve. This approach is much less costly and side effects are minimal. Observation is recommended for children with no bleeding or only mild bleeding symptoms such as the bruising or petechiae. Now coming to treatment with either IV, intravenous immunoglobulin, IVIG or corticosteroids, particularly in children who present with a mucocutaneous bleeding. So in children who have mucocutaneous bleeding, we can do what? We can give either IVIG or corticosteroids. At what dose we are supposed to give IVIGs? At 0.8 to 1 gram per kg per day for 1 to 2 days induce a rapid rise in the platelets, usually more than 20 into 10^9 per liter in 95% of the patients within 48 hours. Okay, so at this dose, if we will give, the platelets will rise. IVIG appears to induce a response by down-regulating the Fc-mediated phagocytosis of the antibody-coated platelets. So what it is doing is, it is down-regulating the Fc-mediated phagocytosis of antibody-coated platelets. IVIG therapy is both expensive and time-consuming and typically requires an inpatient admission. Additionally, after infusion, there is risk of headache and vomiting suggestive of IVIG-induced aseptic meningitis. Fine. So after infusion, headache and vomiting can occur, and there is a risk of IVIG-induced aseptic meningitis. Now coming to the corticosteroid therapy, has been used for many years to treat the acute and chronic ITP in adults and children. Dose of prednisolone at 1 to 4 mg per kg per day appear to induce more rapid rise in platelet count than in untreated patients with ITP. So we can start corticosteroids at this dose of 1 to 4 mg per kg per day, which will induce a rapid rise of platelet count. Corticosteroid therapy is usually continued for a short course, approximately 5 days. We have to give that corticosteroid therapy until a rise in platelet count to more than 20,000 into 10^9 per liter has been achieved to avoid the long-term side effects of corticosteroid therapy that we all know, especially growth failure, diabetes mellitus, and osteoporosis. Fine, so we have to continue the short course of corticosteroids for 5 days to avoid these side effects of growth failure, diabetes mellitus, and osteoporosis. Each of these medications may also be used to treat the subsequent ITP exacerbations, recurrences, which usually occur several weeks after an initial course of therapy in 5 to 10% of the patients. In the special case of ICH, intracranial hemorrhage, multiple modalities should be used, including in case of ICH, what should multiple modalities used, including platelet transfusion, although not recommended in other bleeding manifestations, but here we can. IVIG and high-dose corticosteroids and prompt consultation by the neurosurgery and general surgery for splenectomy. Fine. Now, patients who are bleeding significantly, less than 5% of the children with ITP should be treated. ICH remains a rare, and there are no data showing that treatment actually reduces its incidence. Mucosal bleeding in particular is the most significant in terms of predicting severe bleeding, but specific predictive indices such as positive or negative predictive values are not currently well established. So we have to treat a patient with significant bleeding and which occurs in less than 5% of children with ITP. The role of splenectomy in ITP should be, starting from here, should be reserved for 1 or 2 circumstances. The older children with a severe ITP that has lasted more than 1 year, chronic ITP and whose symptoms are not easily controlled with the therapy. So splenectomy in ITP is not usually done. In which cases it's done is if the children is more than 4 years with severe ITP that has lasted more than 1 year. This is now considered as chronic ITP and whose symptoms are not easily controlled by the therapy. Now the second case where splenectomy can be done is when life-threatening hemorrhage complicates the acute ITP if the platelet count cannot be corrected rapidly with the transfusion of platelets and administration of IVIG and corticosteroids. Right? So in ICH, example is ICH. Platelet count is not corrected rapidly with transfusion of platelets also. So then we can do splenectomy. Splenectomy is associated with a lifelong risk of overwhelming post-splenectomy infection caused by the encapsulated organism. So after splenectomy, we all know that post-splenectomy infection can be caused by encapsulated organism, increase the risk of thrombosis and potential development of the pulmonary hypertension in adulthood. So these are the risks of splenectomy, and we should know that there can be increased infections, increased risk of thrombosis and potential development of pulmonary hypertension in adulthood. As an alternative to splenectomy, rituximab has been used in children to treat the chronic ITP. this is something very new, that if we are not doing an splenectomy, what we are using is rituximab has been used in children to treat the chronic ITP. In 30 to 40% of the children, rituximab has induced a partial or complete remission. But in only the number is very low, right? 30 to 40% only. TPO receptor agonists have also been used to increase the platelet count and are approved for pediatric use. Okay.